Thieves are absolutely insane and possibly one of the only classes in Dragon's Dogma 2 that can truly be immortal. From fast-paced action to amazing tricks, this class will not disappoint and has remained consistently one of my favorites even after finishing the full game. So today, ladies and gents, we're going over its best abilities as well as how to unlock some of its best secret master skills very early on. Going over a quick overview of the class, Thieves have a number of big advantages compared to everybody else. One is that they seem to be one of the few with an on-demand dodge via the Swift Step mechanic. This is actually something you can pull off relatively easy, it's very fast, can even break out of animations, and generally will keep you out of harm's way against most of the enemies with ease. You of course also have the quick attacks via the carve mechanic. It's a pretty good one, deals good damage and also has no stamina consumption. However, Twin Fangs are by far the best. They can actually break through enemies' defenses, stagger them momentarily, and most important, if you actually hit enemies from behind, weak points, or whenever you hit them in a staggered phase, you will do an execution move that completely destroys their HP bars. So let's get started with the weapon skills, beginning with the Cutting Wind and its previous upgrade, Biting Wind, which you get at a lower level. But essentially, if you ever wanted to feel like a maniac running at high speeds and slashing everything in your path, well, that's pretty much it. However, I will say that this is a solid B tier well skill. Reason being is because it tends to overshoot a lot, you kinda tend to run too fast and sometimes way past enemies, and even that is not going to deal that much damage. However, if you do get its Cutting Wind upgrade, you can actually follow up back at the same target, so it kinda makes up for its overshooting mechanic. It can also be a great way to catch up with faster creatures such as wolves or even harpies. They will not be able to catch you while you're gonna be able to hit them back. The next one is Ignited Blades, actually very good early on, however be careful about its initial activation, which can last for like a split second. It proved to be a pretty good source of damage in some of the early stages, but it kinda tends to fall off, especially if you get somebody like a mage in your party, which can already provide a much longer lasting weapon buff compared to the fire you get on this. You can still keep it if you want to be a bit more dynamic, like having both fire as well as whatever other elemental you want from the mage, but honestly in the later stages I tend to completely drop this off for something much better. The next one is Shadow Cloak and its Shadow Veil upgrade. These will actually let you blend in with your environment, cover yourself with mud for example, and just like sneak around enemies. However, I found that these situations are actually very few and far in between. There's no need to do this, plus there's gonna be a much better option via the Smoke Bomb just a few levels higher that does much better at, well, confusing enemies, especially since one of your biggest draws for this is that you can do assassinations via Twin's Blade if, for example, enemies are not aware of your presence. But again, Smoke Bomb is gonna do a much better job at that. Now, the fourth one is an absolute god tier. It's the Helm Splitter, and this is essentially going to turn you into a mobile enemy blender. You're gonna jump really high up into the sky, start spinning at very high speeds, and completely shred through enemies' HPs. Especially the larger they are, like Brutes, Cyclops, and some of the other larger bosses, you're going to absolutely destroy them. Plus, its Skull Splitter upgrade will make your spin even faster and you will deal even more damage, which is why this skill has consistently remained on my skill bar through the entire game. But most important is you can actually use that as a way to jump on enemies' backs, especially if you angle this properly and also hold down R2 or whatever you use on the keyboard and mouse to hold onto enemies' backs, which is going to open up a whole bunch of other stuff you can do to them, like even setting up explosives in their necks and send them flying. Which brings us to another god tier skill called the Powdered Blast, the advanced version of the Powdered Charge. However, both of these work very well. So this is going to let you place down explosives. However, it also lets you lodge them inside of enemies' bodies whenever you climb on some of these larger bosses. And it's especially useful when you place them inside of their necks or on their heads, because you can then unleash a powerful damage explosion as you jump down to completely send them flying, or again to send them back on their butts. This no joke deals tons of damage, especially near weak points, and also sends them really quickly in a stunning phase. To make this a bit more efficient, the way I recommend using it is after already stunning an enemy with a previous powdered blast, is to try and lodge another one while the enemy is still down, and then just continue damage as normal, because this is going to then let you activate that explosion, and then you can again follow up with a quick jump on their back for a second or third powdered blast really quickly. No joke, this remained one of the best in the entire game, and especially if you focus on bosses, this is an absolute must. Now, the sixth skill is an absolute blast to play, no pun intended, but essentially you're going to be using explosives to disengage from enemies and also double jump. So there are two ways in which you can use this with great success. One is to essentially give you a double jump so that you can follow up with a heavy Twin Fangs attack and just lodge those knives into your enemy's necks. This is going to provide some devastating damage, more often than not one-shotting enemies, or at the very least completely breaking their guards. But another way is to navigate through the environment. Like for example, if there's a higher up place that you normally can't reach, you can use this instead to maybe get to a treasure chest you normally cannot otherwise, or to just jump around very awesomely and just feel like an assassin jumping from one roof to another as you make your way through the environment. But overall, god tier through and through, and something that you should definitely have just because of these skills. At number 7, a situationally okay ability is Ensnare. This is going to give you a few ways to mess up with enemies. Like for example, since you lack abilities to shoot flying enemies, this can be a great way to pull harpies from the sky and bring them more to your level. However, in my opinion, it's best used against some of the larger enemies like bosses to make them fall over. Whenever you use Concussive Blast against Cyclops and you see them wobbling, you can actually ensnare against one of their legs, pull it over, and this is going to make them fall over on their faces. Or better yet, if you're close to some sort of canyon or other steep places, you can make them fall to their death, which is pretty funny to look at. At number 8, obviously no thief would be a thief without having some kind of smoke screen. Well, don't be fooled by this ability, it's actually a top tier option, because the moment you throw this down, this immediately puts targets in an unaware state. And if you didn't know about this, you can then follow up with a quick Twin Fang via the triangle button, and this is going to immediately perform that finishing assassination move, which more often than not is going to one-shot them, or at very least slash off a huge amount of their HP bar. But even if you don't deal that much damage and use normal abilities, it's a great way to completely stop them from at least hitting you. They get completely blinded, it's going to be all chaos, and it looks really awesome to have everybody dealt this way via the Shrouded Well Smoke. But besides this, you can also follow up with other abilities since they are unaware. You can, for example, steal stuff from them, which is another ability we're gonna cover in just a little bit. And that's going to be this right here called the Pilfer. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but essentially this is a steal mechanic. You can steal stuff from enemies whenever you, for example, put them in a down state or when they become unaware. So one of those situations was via the smoke screen, but another one is if you make them fall over. And generally this can be pretty okay because you can get some extra resources. However, it's not like a super useful skill to have. Not a god tier, it's situationally good whenever you want something extra from the loot drops. The next ability, however, is the complete opposite. However, it's going to require quite a bit of setup. It's still a solid A tier or maybe A minus in my opinion, since it's not useful against more enemies. But Draw and Quarter, or its previous upgrade Gut and Run, can let you provide some insane damage to enemies' weaknesses. So you can jump on enemies' faces like necks, backs, and other weak points, perform a very high damage stab ability that's going to completely gut them, and if it also happens to be a weak spot, you can deal even higher damage than normally. The point that this can actually be a solid damage dealer compared to some of the other stuff that you have should you focus on boss fighting a lot. But again, the drawback is that not many bosses will give you too many windows of opportunity to do this, and many times it can go extremely wrong. Moving on to number 11, if Reverse Uno card had a skill, it's probably easy kill. However, it's probably not as useful, and in this case I would say it's just a B+ at best. Well, this kind of lets you dart behind the target after parrying, which in this case you have to do by actually holding down the button. But this can follow up with a very awesome strong attack that for at least some of the smaller enemies can mean a complete one-shot. However, it's kinda iffy. Well, one of them is that you have to manually activate this as you're about to get hit, and the window of activation is very low, so if you do it too soon, you're about to get hit. It can, however, be useful against flurries of attacks. When enemies hit you multiple times, you can eventually couple this and it will hit the target. That, or you have to do a perfect parry to use it. But the damage on some of the higher level enemies is pretty low. You consume quite a lot of stamina, so it kind of falls off a little bit too much for you to use it too consistently. And this, ladies and gents, brings us to the final two skills of the thief. These are the master skills, and you actually learn them from two specific NPCs. We're gonna talk about that in just a bit, but in the meantime, these are the Blades of the Pyre and the Formless Faint. Formless Faint, of course, being the strongest ability in the entire game. So the first one is Blades of the Pyre. This kind of reminds me a bit of the Ignited Blade. It kind of has the same animation. It also gives you the fire effect on the blade. However, it also deals this blazing inferno explosion damage that completely destroys enemies and also your character. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, almost like a kamikaze. When you perform this, you're going to wipe out enemies' HP bars, but also your own. So you can definitely use some resistances or potions to cure blaze damage, but in this case, you can definitely go ahead and keep this for the enemies, for example, weak points. I actually went ahead against an enemy's head, like this Cyclops right here, and no joke, this thing took down a whole HP bar right there. As you can see, it completely fell over to a quarter HP, completely taking it down from the previous quarter HP bar that it had. So definitely something to take into account if you want to use this instead of the draw and quarter mechanic, since you technically don't have to be that close to the weak point for the damage to still count. And this, ladies and gents, brings us the true strongest ability in the game, the Formless Faint. This, once activated, will make your character automatically dodge any source of harm. This includes physical attacks, magic attacks, even the sleep from the harpies, as well as any damage on the ground effect. No joke, even breath attacks can do nothing against you, even if you stay inside of a dragon's mouth. So you're absolutely free to unleash damage. You're going to be able to face roll any target in the game for as long as you still have stamina. And guess what? There are many easy to craft potions and other consumables that will regen a ton of stamina back. So this is something that you're going to immediately want to use, and it's going to completely trivialize the game like no other vocation can. So to get these, you're going to have to head over to the Nameless Village right here to the east. There's going to be an early on mission from the capital that brings you here anyway, so make sure you follow through. After a quick investigation, talking with the NPCs in the village, this will lead you to the old manor up in the same village, just a bit further up the road. Inside, you will find the first thief master who will give you one of the legend opus, and this is going to teach you that Blade of the Pyre. Now, for the second one, you're going to have to continue through the same quest and go around the manor in the back up until you see kind of like this ladder that leads downstairs. This will actually be part of the same mission. There's a trial inside that you will have to quickly complete. And once you complete that successfully and reach the hidden hideout, you will meet the second thief master who's going to give you another one of those, well, scrolls, which is going to teach you the Formless Faint, the strongest ability in the entire game. Plus, on your way out, there are a bunch of other items over here, like a bunch of very strong set of daggers, plus a pretty nice set of thieves pants that you can get, and this is going to help you a ton in the early stages. In terms of the core skills, obviously go ahead and learn these ASAP. Scarlet Kisses especially is the most important, as this lets you do a flurry of attacks much faster by repeatedly tapping square or the equivalent on the keyboard and mouse. This is the best way to use against fallen enemies, against their weak points. You also have Controlled Fall, which lets you recover much faster by pressing jump at the right moment when an enemy throws you. There's also Bump and Lift. This is actually pretty interesting because it has an automatic steal mechanic when you just hit enemies normally with the carve mechanic. And finally, there's also the footpad. You can use actual structures like walls as platforms to jump a little bit higher up, but I found this to be situationally useful at best. And in terms of augmentations, there are some pretty useful ones. We have Subtlety, which is going to help you to go in a bit more unnoticed in combat. There's also Gratification, which is going to restore HP when you deliver killing blows against targets, so you can actually regen your, well, HP without having to resort to items or healing. There's also Vigor, by the way, which is going to give you some extra, well, a little bit of stamina in there when you cling to targets. You're going to be doing that quite a bit, so this can help reduce the cost of that. And most important, Verve, once you reach rank 10, I believe this unlocks. This is going to give you some extra strength. So I believe that translates to about like 26 total like strength over there, or maybe a bit more than that, but it's pretty useful and it enhances your damage quite a bit. Anyway, that's been pretty much it with the Thief. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.